No bonus for seniors. Carson Vickery slid the manila envelope across the glass conference table as if he were dealing cards. Rain pounded the windows behind him, making his voice sound even chillier than usual. I'm Leonard Abrams, 60 years old, and I've worked at Iron Ridge Components for 27 years. In 11 days, I would have qualified for my $94,000 retirement bonus. Instead, I'm stuck in this sterile room listening to a 45-year-old tech guy tell me my time is up. We're restructuring, Carson continued, adjusting his designer glasses. Sign the severance by Friday or get nothing. I glanced at the packet, standard termination papers, a modest severance offer, and a non-compete clause that would prevent me from working in the industry for 2 years. The usual deal companies offer when they want you gone but want to avoid lawsuits. Understood, I replied, thanking him for the opportunity. Carson blinked, likely expecting me to argue, plead, or threaten legal action. Instead, I stood, shook his hand, and walked out. The warehouse floor felt different that afternoon. After 27 years of walking these aisles, checking inventory, training new hires, and solving problems management never knew existed, I felt a shift. I had been there when old Mr. Hendricks ran the place from a metal desk in the corner, survived the warehouse fire in 2018, the recession of 2009, and 3 different computer system overhauls, each promising to revolutionize everything. Now, Carson Vickery, hired 6 months ago from a software firm in Cincinnati, was cleaning house, getting rid of the dead weight. As I heard him tell Felicia Tran from HR, I packed my desk slowly. 27 years don't fit in a single cardboard box, but I made it work. My coffee mug from my daughter for Father's Day, a small photo of my late wife Helen at the company picnic in 2015, and a stack of safety awards and productivity certificates that used to mean something. Tommy Rodriguez, one of the forklift operators I trained, stopped as I sealed the box. Mr. Abrams, this isn't right, he said quietly. Everyone knows you should get that bonus. Sometimes, things don't go as planned, Tommy. He seemed like he wanted to say more, but I patted his shoulder and headed to the exit. The security guard, Pete Williams, had been here almost as long as I had. He avoided eye contact as I handed him my badge and keys that we both knew this was about saving the company $94,000 and making room for Carson's people. I drove home in the rain, thinking about the calls I needed to make. I started at Iron Ridge Components when I was 33, fresh out of the Army and needing steady work. Helen was pregnant with our daughter Jessica, and we needed health insurance. What began as a temporary job turned into nearly 3 decades of my life. The company manufactured metal fasteners and hardware supplies for construction and industrial clients across the Midwest. Not glamorous, but steady work that paid well enough to buy a house, raise a family, and plan for retirement. In the early years, I worked nights and weekends, learning every aspect of the operation. When Mr. Hendricks decided to expand from local to regional distribution, I helped design the new warehouse layout and wrote most training manuals by hand. When the first computer system came in, I taught the older workers how to use it. Helen joked that I cared more about that place than our own garage. She wasn't wrong. I took pride in solving problems and being the reliable guy management could count on when things went wrong. Carson Vickery had come 6 months ago with big plans and bigger opinions. The previous CEO, James Mitchell, had retired after 30 years, and the board brought in Carson to modernize operations and improve efficiency. Carson came from a tech company where everything was data-driven and workers were just resources to optimize. Our first meeting hadn't gone well, Carson called it a strategic alignment session, but it felt more like an interrogation. He'd asked why we still used paper logs for inventory tracking, why our safety meetings were weekly instead of monthly, and why we hadn't automated more operations. I explained that paper logs never crashed, weekly safety meetings caught problems before they became accidents, and automation worked until it broke down, needing people to fix it. Carson smiled and nodded, but I could tell he'd already dismissed me as just another old-timer resisting change. Over the months, I watched him systematically push out anyone over 50. First, it was early retirement packages for legacy employees. Then performance improvement plans for workers doing their jobs perfectly fine for years, and finally outright terminations for anyone questioning his methods. Felicia Tran, the HR director, tried to warn me weeks ago. We've worked together for 15 years. and she knew I was close to retirement eligibility. "Leonard, consider early retirement," she said during a chance encounter in the parking lot. "Carson's asking about your compensation package." I should have listened. I should have seen the writing on the wall when 3 senior employees were let go just weeks before their retirement bonuses. I figured they wouldn't dare touch me, not after 27 years and everything I'd done for the company. I was wrong. I sat in my kitchen that evening, staring at the severance paperwork spread across Helen's old wooden table. The rain had stopped, but the silence felt heavier than the storm. $94,000. What 27 years of loyalty was worth to Iron Ridge Components? In 11 days, it would have been mine by contract. Instead, Carson Vickery found a way to save the company money by firing me just before the deadline. The severance offer was insulting. 6 weeks' pay and a promise to extend my health insurance for 3 months. After nearly 3 decades of building that place from a small regional supplier into a major Midwest distributor, they were offering me what they'd give any random employee laid off. I pulled out the employee handbook I'd helped write back. In 2009, flipped to the section on retirement benefits, and read the language I negotiated with the previous management. The retirement bonus was contractual for employees with 25 or more years of service who reached age 60. There was supposed to be a grace period, a protection against situations like this. But Carson was new. He might not know about the protective clauses buried in policies before his time, or maybe he knew and thought I wouldn't fight back. I considered calling Jessica in Chicago. She was a corporate lawyer now, successful and busy with her family. She'd offered to review my retirement paperwork months ago, but I waved her off, telling her not to worry about her old man, that everything was handled. Pride kept me from making that call. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Mitchell Goldstein, my sister's son, a labor attorney in Columbus specializing in employment law. We talked at Helen's funeral 2 years ago, and he'd given me his card with a message: "Family helps family. Call if you need anything." The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Uncle Leonard, everything okay?" I told him about Carson, the timing, and the severance offer. Mitchell listened without interrupting, asking only a few specific questions about my employment contract and the company's retirement policy. "Uncle Leonard," he said finally, "I think you should hold off on signing those papers. Can you scan everything and email it to me tonight? You think there's something there? I think Carson Vickery made a mistake, and if I'm right, it's going to cost him a lot more than $94,000. After I hung up, I made a cup of coffee and sat back down at the table. For the first time since leaving that conference room, I felt something other than resignation. I felt like maybe this fight wasn't over yet. Mitchell called me back at 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. I was already up, drinking coffee and staring at the gray October sky. "Uncle Leonard, we need to talk in person. Can you drive to Columbus today?" His office was in a sleek downtown building that smelled like expensive carpet and fresh paint. Mitchell looked more like his mother than I remembered. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the focused energy that made you see why he was successful. "Carson Vickery screwed up," he said without preamble, spreading my employment documents across his conference table. "Look at this." He pointed to a section of the employee handbook I'd forgotten about, Policy 4.7b, the Retirement Benefit Protection Clause. It stated that any employee within 30 days of retirement bonus eligibility could not be terminated without cause, and termination for restructuring purposes during this period was a breach of contract. "I helped write this," I said slowly. "Back when James Mitchell was CEO, we had issues with employees getting laid off right before their pensions vested. Carson either doesn't know about it or is gambling you won't fight back." Mitchell leaned forward. "Here's what we're going to do. You're not signing that severance agreement. Instead, you're going to request a formal meeting with HR to discuss your termination terms. Felicia Tran runs HR. She's good people, but she won't go against Carson. She will if she realizes the company is about to face a lawsuit. Leonard, this isn't just about your bonus anymore. If Carson's been systematically firing employees before their retirement benefits kick in, this could be a pattern of discrimination, a federal case." I spent the next 2 hours in Mitchell's office going over every detail of my termination and the events leading to it. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, asking about other recently let-go employees, Carson's reasons for restructuring, and any documentation I had. Do you still have access to your work email? He asked. Through Thursday, then they cut me off. Print everything. Every email Carson sent about restructuring. Every memo about policy changes. Every communication about your termination. We'll need a paper trail. I drove back to Dayton feeling like I had a purpose again. But when I arrived at Iron Ridge Components Wednesday morning to clean out my remaining files and print emails, Carson was waiting for me. "Leonard," he said, appearing in the hallway as if he'd been watching for me. "I thought you'd left already." "Just finishing up some paperwork," I said. "Actually, I need to talk to you." He gestured toward his office. "About your severance package." His office was all glass and chrome, nothing like the comfortable wood-paneled space where James Mitchell used to work. Carson sat behind his oversized desk and pulled out a revised severance agreement. "I've been thinking about our conversation Monday," he said. "You've been a valuable employee, and I want to ensure you're taken care of. I'm authorized to increase your severance to 12 weeks' pay." The new number was still nowhere near my retirement bonus, but more than double the original offer. "There's one condition," Carson continued. "You need to sign today, and the non-compete clause remains in effect." He was trying to buy me off. The question was whether he knew about the policy violation or was just trying to close a loose end before it became a problem. "I appreciate the offer, Carson, but I need a few more days to think about it." His smile tightened. "Leonard, I'm trying to be generous here, but this offer expires at the close of business today. After that, we revert to the original terms." "I understand." I left his office and went straight to the warehouse floor. I had about 6 hours before Carson's deadline, and I needed to print every email I could find. By 4 p.m., I had 47 pages of documentation hidden in my truck. At 5 p.m., I walked back into Carson's office and told him I needed more time to consider his offer. At 5:01 p.m., I was officially back to the original severance terms. But by then, I already knew we had him. Thursday morning, Mitchell called with news that changed everything. "Leonard, I've been digging into Iron Ridge's recent employment history. In the past 8 months, Carson has terminated 7 employees who were within 60 days of major retirement bonuses or pension milestones." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. 7. George Murphy from Quality Control, 63 years old, fired 3 weeks before his 30-year pension bonus. Patricia Walsh from Accounting, 58, terminated 2 months before early retirement eligibility. I've got 5 more just like them. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I couldn't taste anything. These weren't just numbers. These were people I'd worked with for decades. George had trained me on quality inspection procedures when I first started. Patricia helped me navigate paperwork when Helen was sick and I needed to adjust my health insurance. "Mitchell, how is this legal? How is Carson getting away with this?" Because each termination was documented as performance-based or restructuring-related, and most of these folks just took their severance and walked away. They figured fighting the company would cost more than they'd recover. But they were wrong, dead wrong. "Leonard, this isn't just wrongful termination anymore. This is age discrimination, and it's systematic. Carson's been specifically targeting older employees to avoid paying retirement benefits. That's a federal crime." Mitchell explained that he spent the previous day contacting terminated employees. 3 still had documentation of their firings. 2 were willing to join a potential lawsuit, and 1, George Murphy, had recorded a conversation where Carson explicitly mentioned saving money by getting rid of the dead weight before they became too expensive. George recorded him on his phone. Carson didn't know, but George suspected something was wrong and wanted proof for his protection. "Leonard, this recording is smoking gun evidence." I thought about George, a quiet man who'd worked in quality control for 32 years. He was careful and methodical, the kind of worker who caught issues before they became disasters. Of course, he'd documented Carson's mistakes. What happens now? Now we file a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We request an investigation into age discrimination at Iron Ridge Components, and we file a class action lawsuit seeking damages for all affected employees. How long will this take? Months, maybe a year. But Leonard, we're not just fighting for your bonus anymore. We're fighting for everyone Carson wronged, and we'll make sure he can't do this to anyone else. That afternoon, I drove to George Murphy's house in Kettering. He lived in a modest ranch home with a carefully maintained garden and an American flag by the front door. When he answered, he looked older than his 63 years. Leonard, I heard about what happened to you, he said, inviting me in for coffee. Same thing they did to me. We talked for 2 hours. George had worked at Iron Ridge since 1991, building a reputation as the most thorough quality inspector in the company's history. When Carson arrived, he immediately questioned George's methods, claiming they were inefficient and outdated. He called me into his office last month, George said. The company was moving in a new direction and needed people who could adapt to modern practices. When I asked what that meant, he said, "Honestly, George, we need fewer gray heads and more fresh thinking." He said that. I recorded it. Figured I might need proof later. George played the recording on his phone. Carson's voice was clear, casual, and damning. That evening, I called Mitchell with a simple message. File the complaint. Let's end this. Friday morning, I did something I hadn't done in 27 years. I called in sick to work. Instead of going to Iron Ridge Components, I drove to Columbus and spent the day in Mitchell's office finalizing our strategy. By noon, we'd submitted a formal complaint to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission alleging systematic age discrimination at Iron Ridge Components. By 2 p.m., we'd filed a class action lawsuit in federal court seeking damages for 8 wrongfully terminated employees. By 3 p.m., Mitchell had called Felicia Tran directly. I explained the situation to her. Mitchell told me after hanging up, she's been with the company for 15 years, and she knows exactly what's been happening. She also knows if this goes to trial, her department will look incompetent at best, complicit at worst. What did she say? She asked for 24 hours to review the employee files and consult with the company's legal counsel. I drove home feeling like we'd crossed a line. There was no going back. Either we'd win this fight or Carson would make sure I never worked in the industry again. Saturday, I got a call from Tommy Rodriguez. "Mr. Abrams, something weird's happening here." Carson called an emergency meeting yesterday afternoon, brought in some lawyers from Cincinnati, and today he's been going through personnel files all morning. "Tommy, you need to be careful. Don't do anything that could get you in trouble." "I know, but I thought you should hear this." Felicia's been in meetings with the lawyers since yesterday, and word is Carson's really upset about something. Sunday evening, Mitchell called with an update. Felicia requested a meeting for Monday morning. She wants to discuss a potential resolution before this goes any further. What kind of resolution? The kind where they admit they made mistakes and try to fix them before a federal judge makes them pay punitive damages. Monday morning, I put on my best suit and drove to Columbus. Mitchell arranged for the meeting to take place at his office rather than Iron Ridge Components, neutral ground. Felicia arrived at 10 a.m. with 2 lawyers I didn't recognize. She looked tired, as if she hadn't been sleeping well. "Leonard," she said, shaking my hand, "I want you to know that what happened to you and the others was not company policy. Carson acted without proper consultation with HR or legal counsel." One of the lawyers, a woman in her 40s with graying hair, took over. "Mr. Abrams, my client is prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement that would include full retirement benefits for all affected employees, plus additional compensation for the hardship caused by these improper terminations." Mitchell leaned forward, and "Mr. Vickery's employment status." The lawyer exchanged glances with Felicia. "Mr. Vickery is no longer with Iron Ridge Components. His termination was effective at the close of business Friday." I felt something loosen in my chest. Carson was gone. "The board of directors has asked me to personally apologize to you and the other employees who were wrongfully terminated," Felicia continued. "This was a serious failure in our oversight, and we're committed to making it right." We spent the next 3 hours negotiating details. By the end of the meeting, I had my $94,000 retirement bonus plus interest, 2 years of deferred retirement contributions the company had quietly held back, and a formal apology to go in my personnel file. More importantly, George Murphy and the other 6 terminated employees would receive similar compensation. As we left the building, Mitchell put his hand on my shoulder. "Uncle Leonard, Carson Vickery just learned that some old-timers know exactly how to fight back." Tuesday morning, I received a call from James Mitchell, the former CEO of Iron Ridge Components. "Leonard, I heard about what happened with Carson. I'm sorry. That's not the kind of company we built." "It's being handled, Mr. Mitchell." "I know." Felicia filled me in. "The board asked me to come back as interim CEO while they search for Carson's replacement." I wanted to call and ask if you'd consider staying on. We need someone with your experience to help get things back on track." I looked out my kitchen window at the maple tree Helen had planted when we first bought the house. Its leaves were turning gold and red, ready for winter. "I appreciate the offer, but I think it's time for me to retire properly." "I understand, but Leonard, I want you to know something. The board is implementing new policies to make sure this never happens again. No employee within 60 days of retirement eligibility can be terminated without board approval, and we're requiring all senior management to complete training on age discrimination and employment law." "That's good to hear," I replied. "There's something else. The board voted to name the new employee protection policy after you, the Leonard Abrams Fair Employment Protection Policy. It'll be part of every new employee orientation." Wednesday afternoon, I drove to Iron Ridge Components one last time, not to clean out my desk or turn in equipment, but to pick up my final retirement paperwork and bonus check. Felicia met me in the lobby. She handed me an envelope and a small wooden plaque. "From all of us who are staying," she said, "thank you for fighting for what was right." The plaque read, "Leonard Abrams, 27 years of dedicated service, a man who stood up for all of us." I walked through the warehouse one last time. Tommy Rodriguez and several other workers stopped their tasks to shake my hand. They knew what had happened and that Carson was gone. Asterisk, "You did it, Mr. Abrams," Tommy said. "You got that bastard." Asterisk, "We all did it, Tommy. Don't let anyone push you around like that again." Asterisk, Thursday morning, I deposited my retirement bonus and back contributions, $137,412. Not just the money Carson tried to steal, but everything the company had quietly deferred over the years. I spent the afternoon at the bank meeting with a financial advisor about my actual retirement. For the first time in months, I could plan for the future without worrying about legal bills or finding another job. At 60, I felt a renewed sense of freedom. Asterisk, Friday, I got a call from George Murphy. "Leonard, I wanted to thank you. I got my check yesterday, plus interest. Carson cost me 3 months of retirement, but now I'm better off than if he'd never messed with me in the first place." Asterisk, "What are you going to do now?" Asterisk, "My grandson's been asking me to teach him about woodworking. I think I'll build him a treehouse." Asterisk, that weekend, Jessica drove down from Chicago with her family. We had dinner at the kitchen table where I'd first read Carson's severance papers. My grandson played with toy cars on the floor while we talked. "Dad, I'm proud of you for fighting back," Jessica said. "Mom would have been proud too." Asterisk, I thought about Helen, about the plans we'd made for retirement. She'd wanted to travel to see the national parks, to spend time with our grandchildren, without worrying about work schedules. "I think I'm going to buy an RV," I told Jessica. "Really? Your mother always wanted to see the Grand Canyon." Asterisk, Sunday evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the sunset through the maple trees' golden leaves. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing, dogs barking, life continuing the way it should. Carson Vickery had tried to steal 27 years of my life's work with one meeting and a manila envelope. Instead, he'd given me something better, the knowledge that sometimes, when you stand up for what's right, you win. Sometimes the hardest fight is the one you thought you'd never have to have, but it's also the one that reminds you who you really are. Asterisk, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the backyard, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The events of the past few weeks had been tumultuous, but I emerged stronger, more determined, and hopeful for the future. I thought about the legacy I wanted to leave, not just for Jessica and my grandchildren, but for the employees at Iron Ridge Components who might face similar challenges. Asterisk, the next day, I called my financial advisor to discuss the RV. I wanted something that would allow me to travel comfortably, explore the national parks Helen had always dreamed of visiting, and create new memories with my family. After some discussion, we settled on a model that fit my budget and needs. Asterisk, after finalizing the purchase, I spent the following weeks preparing for retirement. I organized my home office, sorting through years of paperwork, old projects, and memories. Each item told a story: my first safety award, photos from company events, and even the training manuals I had written. I felt a mix of nostalgia and pride as I cleared out the remnants of my professional life. Asterisk, as I settled into my new routine, I took time to reconnect with friends and family. I visited old colleagues who had also retired, sharing stories and laughter over coffee. We reminisced about the good old days at Iron Ridge, the challenges we faced, and the victories we celebrated together. These moments reminded me of the camaraderie that had developed over the years and how important it was to maintain those relationships. I also reached out to the employees who had been affected by Carson's actions. I wanted to ensure they felt supported and knew they were not alone. I organized a small gathering for them at a local diner, inviting everyone who had been part of the layoffs or had faced challenges due to the restructuring. We shared our experiences and discussed what we could do moving forward. It felt good to be surrounded by people who understood the situation firsthand. During our conversations, I learned that some former employees were still struggling to find new jobs. Together, we brainstormed ways to help each other, whether through job leads, networking, or simply providing moral support. It was a reminder that even in challenging times, a community could come together to uplift one another. As summer turned to fall, I finally took that trip in the RV. My first destination was the Grand Canyon, a place Helen had always wanted to see. The moment I stood at the rim, gazing into the vastness of the canyon, I felt a profound sense of peace. I could almost hear Helen's laughter echoing in the wind, urging me to embrace this new chapter fully. I spent days exploring the park, hiking the trails, and taking in the breathtaking views. With each passing moment, I felt the weight of the past lift. I was creating new memories, not just for myself, but for my family. I took photos of the stunning landscapes to share with Jessica and her kids, so they could feel connected to this adventure. I drove from one national park to another, visiting sites like Yellowstone and Yosemite. I found joy in the simple pleasures, cooking outdoors, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, and listening to the sounds of nature. I often thought about the fight I had won and how it had not only changed my life, but could potentially change the lives of others if I continued to advocate for fair treatment in the workplace. I began to think about how I could use my experience to help others. I reached out to local community centers to offer workshops on employee rights and age discrimination. I wanted to empower others with knowledge, so they could stand up for themselves if they ever found themselves in similar situations. The idea of giving back and making a difference filled me with purpose. I parked the RV back in my driveway after a long and fulfilling trip. I reflected on everything that had transpired. I realized that while the battle against Carson had been tough, it had opened doors to new opportunities and a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to embrace this next chapter of life, filled with adventures, family, and a commitment to advocate for fairness in the workplace. Every now and then, I would receive updates from my former coworkers, and it warmed my heart to hear that many of them had found new jobs or were pursuing their passions. My efforts to support them had made a tangible difference in their lives, and it reinforced my belief that standing up for what is right not only benefits you, but can also uplift those around you. As I settled into my new life, I knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on, equipped with the lessons I had learned and the strength I had gained. Sometimes the hardest fight leads to the most rewarding victories, and I was determined to keep fighting for myself, for my family, and for anyone who needed a voice.